It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 982. Coming up at 4:30 today, we dive into the football for the first time. We will be joined by our pal Dan Pizzuta, as we typically are on Thursdays at 4:30. And then coming up at 5 o'clock today, a pretty appropriate week for us to have our newest Odyssey Sports NFL insider, Patrick Peterson, the former Cardinals legendary cornerback, is going to join us. He's not joining us like some of you in the YouTube comments seem to want him to, which is that he's joining the Commanders. No. He's going to talk about them and their matchup against his former team. He is our newest Odyssey Sports NFL insider, so we're going to talk to Pat P coming up at 5 o'clock. I'm going to start the show on a bit of a serious note, though, today, because one of the biggest stories in sports is what really has been happening all season in the WNBA in regards to Caitlin Clark, but took another turn last night. And the league finally said something about it. I'm not even going to say to their credit, because this is something that happened far too late. There was an incident last night in the Game 2 win for the Connecticut Sun that ended Caitlin Clark's rookie season as the Fever succumbed to a veteran Sun team that just played an incredible 2 games of disciplined, tough basketball. They were fantastic defensively, and I wish we could talk about that. I wish we could talk about the ways that I would like to see Indiana mature as a basketball team, for all the new fans that Caitlin Clark has brought, and for not just to the league, but to that team. Like, there's an audience for that, of like, hey, how does Caitlin Clark get better? Even especially, I would say, for new WNBA fans that maybe came into this year thinking like, oh, is she going to be the best player in the league? And like, she finished top 5 in MVP voting because she deserved to. She was incredible. I thought she was going to be really good, and she exceeded my expectations. But you see some of the immaturity for her in terms of, okay, this is her first bout at playoff basketball, and because it's a 3-game series and it's only 2 games, like, she doesn't get to grow in the way that often players grow in series that are especially young and in their first one. But you see the immaturity of her coach, who's a first-year coach, the immaturity of the rest of her team, just because they haven't been there before. And I don't mean like human immaturity, I mean basketball immaturity. And that's a fun, interesting sports conversation with a lot of teeth. And with a lot of angles. But we don't get to talk about that. Why? Because some jackwagon in Connecticut last night, whether they were from Connecticut or an Indiana fan or whoever they were from, said some pretty terrible stuff to one of the Sun players. And that continues a long trend of fans in the WNBA, and specifically new fans, specifically, I don't want to say fans of Caitlin Clark, and I don't even want to call these people fans. What it really is people using Caitlin and the league as an excuse to express vile thoughts they have about other people. And this is a league where it is predominantly black and there is a heavy queer population. And all of a sudden you have a white, straight, dominant player. And that's not on Caitlin, but it becomes on Caitlin in a way that I think is terrible for her, and I'll talk about in a second. Not to say it's her fault, but there is a consideration for her that I don't know that people have fully thought through. But there are people that, and this should not be breaking news. This should not be taboo to say this. There are people out there that do not like various minority groups for whatever the reasons, and they look for avenues where they can fight their culture wars. And unfortunately, the WNBA became that this season. Time and time again, example after example of often things that didn't really catch the national radar. Occasionally they did. But it would blow up in comment section after a hard foul on Clark, which happens when you have the ball in the hands as much as she does. And it's just absurd. And the reality is that the league didn't do basically a damn thing about it until today, when after Clark's season is over, they issue this mealy-mouthed statement. The WNBA is a competitive league with some of the most elite athletes in the world. While we welcome a growing fan base, the WNBA will not tolerate racist, derogatory, or threatening comments made about players, teams, and anyone affiliated with the league. League security is actively monitoring threat-related activity and will work directly with teams and arenas to take appropriate measures to include involving law enforcement as necessary. And like, good. But where the hell was this statement in June, in May, when this stuff started happening? And where are the stories of fans being shut down and arrested or kicked out of arenas and banned from earlier in the year when these things would happen? Where is that? Why is it now that in reality, it's very unlikely to happen? It's certainly with the frequency it has, but it's unlikely to happen in these next two series because so many of the people that are doing this stuff are hiding behind Caitlin Clark. And what they're actually doing is putting Caitlin in harm's way. And that's the thing. They don't actually care about any of the people involved other than other than themselves, right? They get to spew their nonsense. They get to spew their vile. And what it does is if you're Caitlin and you're a hyper-competitive person, and it's part of what makes you great, that edge, and it's part of the reason that people like her. It's part of the reason that she is as popular as she is. Yes, the step-back threes. Yes, the skill. Yes, the passing, which is absurd. Like all that stuff, the record-breaking performances is great, but it also comes in this hyper-competitive package that we love in our athletes. But if she's going to talk trash, for instance, last night to De'Wana Bonner after they get mixed up, and I had no problem with it. In fact, I probably had a bigger problem with Bonner telling Caitlin to stop chirping at the ref because, one, the play they were talking about, she definitely fouled Clark, and it happens, like, fine, it wasn't intentional. She closed out, and Clark got hit, and Bonner then told Caitlin, it looked like anyway, I couldn't see what they were saying, obviously, like, hey, quit chirping at the ref, and Caitlin was like, don't tell me what to do. Fine, that happens. We see that all the time in the NBA. We see it in the W. We see it in the NFL. We see it, we see quarterback begging the referee for a roughing call and the defensive lineman being like, dude, shut up, right? It's not a female thing. It's not a woman thing. It's not a WNBA specific thing. It's a sports thing. But now if you're Caitlin and you're in that moment, you're in the heat of the battle and you're just being you, competitor, and you have any second thought about being that person because you're like, wait, if I chirp back, is this other player, my colleague who I respect, who I might be talking trash with right now, but I have respect for, which is something Caitlin has consistently said when she's been asked about these things, is that person going to get death threats? And you might say, that seems extreme. What are you talking about? It's happening. It's been happening. And I guarantee you, if you were to search De'Wana Bonner's replies or have access to her DMs on Instagram or wherever else she's accessible to the public, that right now she's got death threats because of a regular sporting action trash talk in a basketball game. And if that's not a sign that we're doing something wrong, like I don't know what to tell you. Because I realize that these conversations are charged with all kinds of emotion and they're conversations at the core of identity and politics and race and gender and all these things that people care a lot about. But I really honestly would challenge you to find anything that I've said in the last 8 minutes of talking about this that's remotely controversial. Hey, we shouldn't hate other people based off their identity. Most people would agree with that foundational statement. Right? And if that's the case, why are we saying things in regards to those things towards other players? Why is that entering, the fan-player interaction beyond any normal trash talk, some of which is inhumane anyway, but I guess to an extent it's part of sports. But why are these the things you're choosing to point out? And why is it people hiding behind Caitlin Clark consistently that are doing them? That's what I want to know. And I would challenge you to answer those questions without some sort of ism in there. And it's different. This is not something that is, this stuff has always been happening. No, it hasn't. Here's Alyssa Thomas, Connecticut Sun guard forward who just baller. She was a member of the U.S. Olympic team. She's been in the league a long time. She's been in the MVP conversation for most of her career. She's one of the best players in the league. And this was her last night after a series win in which she returns her team to the to the league semifinals.
Honestly, it's been a lot of nonsense. I think in my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly. And there's no place for it. And we've been professional throughout the whole entire thing, but I've never been called the things that I've been called on social media, and there's no place for it. and basketball is headed in a great direction, but nah, we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names. I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And we come to play basketball for our job and it's fun, but we don't want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's uncalled for, and something needs to be done, whether it's them checking their fans or this league checking. There's no time for it anymore.
Because the thing is, the most important thing Alyssa says there is, like, these aren't actually fans, right? This is not, calling them fans is giving them too much credit. That means you actually like the thing. You don't. It's a vehicle for you to hate. And it's as simple as that. These are not fans. And so the retort of, well, don't they want the fans? Don't they want to make the money? One, women's sports are not charity. It's a business, it's sports. If you like it, spend your money there. If you don't, then leave it alone. You don't have to go. If you don't like hamburgers, don't go to the burger joint. It's fine. No one's going to judge you. If you make it your entire personality, well, then you're telling on yourself. But if you just quietly stay to the things you like, fine. I'm not a huge baseball guy. I don't spend a ton of time trashing Major League Baseball because people love it. Going to a game is fun. Fine. Like, it's not about all the other stuff until the people that are claiming, oh, it has nothing to do with any of the isms, make it about that stuff. And they just consistently tell on themselves in that way. So none of this should be controversial. It just shouldn't. People should be safe going to work. That includes professional athletes. Shouldn't use any of the isms when you're shouting at the opposing team. And in order to be a fan and in order to be a part of the growth of the league, you actually should like it. It shouldn't be a vehicle for the other stuff. And it does no favors to the player that you claim to love and be a super fan of in Caitlin Clark, who now, as she is competing against someone, has to think, am I about to give this person a couple weeks of, or perhaps longer, of death threats? And is they're guarding her like, crap, if I swing and try to block her shot and miss, am I going to get death threats? That's not what sports are about. And so I hope we can get to a point, and maybe the long winter break and a return to the W season next year, as opposed to Caitlin having been in the spotlight for the better part of 3 years now, or 2+ years since the LSU Final Four the first time around when LSU won. Maybe the break will be the thing that finally settles this down. But Lord, I hope that when she picks up a basketball again in the public eye next April, that this nonsense is left in the past, because this is just completely unsustainable for her, for the league, and for the rest of the players in it. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, quick bit of NBA media news today that caught my eye, and then the rest of the show, we are all in on the NFL, starting with our pal Dan Pizzuto looking back at Monday Night Football and ahead to the Commanders game against the Cardinals at 4:30. to the football coming up at 4:30 with Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd Team, our weekly guest here on the Hoffman Show, getting into all the X's and O's. Really have enjoyed getting into kind of the trends of the league and how they are applying or not to the Commanders. So we'll look at the Commanders through that lens coming up at 4:30 with Dan. Again, 5 o'clock, Patrick Peterson with us today here on the Hoffman Show. Yes, that Patrick Peterson, our newest Odyssey NFL insider, who also was a Cardinals legend. So good week to have him on. And obviously, talking cornerbacks is, Anthony, I don't know if you've heard, it's a topic for Washington on our side of things.
It is definitely a popular topic here in Washington and something we need.
Yeah. Do I ask him if Adam Peters called him, would he don the burgundy and gold? I feel like I have to.
Yeah, I think that could be a follow-up to.
I just think I have to get done? I have to get it out of the way first.
Okay.
I just feel like without it, people are going to be like, so does he want to play? If I was him, I'd be like, I don't know, this insider gig's pretty good. Call guys like you and talk about football, and nobody hits me.
I think it's worth inquiring.
It's worth inquiring. I bet the paycheck's not as good. Speaking of paycheck, NBA news from ESPN today. Really, the news came from The Athletic, who reported on it. Always fun when one media outlet is reporting on another. But our guy, Andrew Marchand, has been on the show quite a bit. He reported that ESPN has laid off NBA insider Zach Lowe, who is fantastic. I've been a Zach Lowe fan basically since Go. I listened to his original podcast back in the day when he was hired by Bill Simmons for Grantland. I just remember a couple of other NBA people that I like being like, Zach Lowe. And I was like, I got to check out this Zach Lowe guy. And I was like, oh my God, he is good. His writing is nuts. His relationships in the league are so good. One thing I always really enjoy playoff time is he has this ability to get people to tell him stuff that's really important from a schematic standpoint. And then always after the finals, he's been able to 4 or 5 years in a row, get the winning coach to sit down for an hour-long show, within a week of them winning the title. And you can tell based off of those conversations, either because they explicitly say it, or you can just tell based off the relationship, oh, Zach knows this person. And he's not someone who, he does break news. And I think this is also interesting timing because Woj obviously just left. But he also just is one of these guys that has great relationships, isn't necessarily in it to break news, but just wants to have the information so he can be right. And I have such an appreciation for people who operate like that because I think it's the best way to do the job. Yes, if your job is to be newsbreaker, you need to break the news. But ultimately, there's value in just knowing people and being like, hey, I'm not going to put this out there. I'm just trying to be better in doing my job, which is to break down the game. Can you give me more intel so I'm right? And they'll typically be like, yeah, I will help you. You screw me over. You put out my strategy. You put out this beforehand, before the game and the other team is on it. Yeah, we're going to have a problem. But he's been so good at that for so long. And then he turned into a guy who was really good on TV as well. And in that way, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense that they laid him off because he's awesome and is a podcast star and a TV guy who does great work for them.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed watching him on NBA Today. I don't quite, frankly, understand the move. Literally a week before preseason's supposed to start.
Right.
But good gracious, he's gone. I mean, they're laying him off.
Van Gundy's gone.
Woj gone.
Well, yeah, it's nuts. And the other thing too is, I will say, I learned in the article that apparently he makes 7 figures, which, Anthony, we're doing it wrong, bro. We need to get on television. Stat.
For real.
But that is a lot of money for a guy who's not involved in their live game coverage. And this is the thing. This is why the Van Gundy thing didn't make sense. They were going to have to pay Van Gundy. He was awesome. And he was a part of their biggest NBA product that makes them money, which is the rights, or the thing that they spend the most money on and make the most money on is live games is where the money is. And Zach is not a part of that. Zach is a part of their studio coverage. So in that way, a guy making 7 figures who's not a former player, et cetera, I can kind of understand that, I guess, even though I think he's like the best analyst arguably that they have on a lot of those studios things in terms of what he brings to the conversations. But yeah, I don't know. It's a sad time in our industry, man. And at least he was making 7 figures, so hopefully he's got some cash stacked. I guess I'll put it that way. And by the way, I guess it's a good time to become an NBA free agent because NBC and Amazon have to hire their crews for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously Zach could go like work at the Ringer and go back and work for Bill Simmons or whatever, but like you got 2 new networks that need to fully staff themselves. So I guess it's a good time if such a thing exists.
Man, ESPN.
It's crazy. Who do you think their next insider will be, though, with Woj gone? And now Zach not necessarily going to be that guy, obviously.
I mean, Zach's gone. I mean, you got Ryan Windhorse.
I guess I saw some stuff on like Twitter and whatever the other day about was Woj holding Wendy back? But
wow.
Yeah. But like our guy Bontemps, former Washington Post, local lad, gone well. My guy Tim McMahon from Dallas, yeehaw. Like, those. Which one of those guys would have the best, like we had the Woj bombs.
Nickname?
Yeah. What's the best breaking news nickname of any of those guys?
I think it's...
If it's Bontemps, like a Bon Bomb doesn't really work. It's like too cheesy.
I like Windhorse's name because you can play off of wind. So you go like a windbreaker, a windmill.
Like the rumor mill. That's like a good segment name, the windmill.
Yeah,
the windy mill. That feels like something that's definitely... Mike Greenberg's 1,000% doing the windy mill on Get Up.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I like Wendy's name. Tim Bontemps. I think it's hard to play off of that. I don't know. We'll have to put a little bit more
we'll
more
report
thought
back.
into it.
We'll report back.
Yeah.
Right. Right now, Windhorse is in the lead, even though we don't actually have a good name outside of a segment that 1,000% Mike Greenberg, if he heard it, would be like, yes, I'm going to do that. Get up. All right. That's the end of my Mike Greenberg.
A whirlwind?
I think you should keep thinking. Okay. All right. Anthony's going to keep thinking, and Dan Pizzuta from the 33rd team is going to join us to talk Commanders next. Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And it's time now for our Thursday visit with Dan Pizzuta, who's joined us in the virtual studio. Video, Dan. We love to see it. What's up, dude?
There we go. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well here on a football Thursday. We got Thursday night football tonight. We might talk about that in a little bit, but we'll see how much meat is on the Commanders' bone. And on it from a national perspective, seems to be a lot more than usual this week. That's what happens when your number 2 overall pick quarterback loses his mind on Monday Night Football. My question for you to start, Dan, though, is from that national perspective. Like, I was listening to Robert Mays on the Athletic Football Show, and he had Mitchell Schwartz on, and their big takeaway was like, yes, Jayden was incredible. This is worth talking about. This is a big time, but also, good God, Cincinnati's defense is terrible. As you walk away from that game Monday night, all of us here in DC are only focused on the Washington side. Where was your focus? Was it what Jayden and this offense did, or was it more like, oh my God, Cincinnati is in trouble, and that thus frames what we see from Washington?
It's probably a little bit of both. I think from just kind of figuring out what is going to be expected of Washington, it was cool because it was certainly different than what we had seen the first 2 weeks. And I think that is definitely something that is interesting enough in Washington's case to be excited and focus on going forward. And like it was, and we had talked about it. A lot of this offense was very Cliff Kingsbury horizontal raid ish, right? All the screens and all of that and the scrambles. But when they came out, there was a very significantly different game plan. They wanted to get out of the pocket more. Jayden Daniels threw on the run more, which is something we talked about last week. So that was good to see added to the game plan. The deep shots in the game were planned up. And so that was another added thing. It does help that Cincinnati's defense is not very good. So I think that did help a new plan probably go as well as it could have. And, you know, when Washington's defense is not very good also, you know, Cincinnati's offense was really good in that game too. And if Washington's, you know, Cincinnati's defense is maybe like a little better, that's what we're talking about. But it was very encouraging because it was different. It wasn't just what they had been doing the last 2 weeks that got them through. And there were significant changes, and then the way Jayden Daniels was able to just kind of lift that up was really special at the time.
The way I saw it was they actually didn't start off that differently in terms of plan. But the difference was, like, it's funny because I actually think the 2 incompletions that Jayden winds up having in the entire game are actually 2 of the most important passes that he threw, because it's 2 deep balls to Terry that he misses, but he threw them. And we talked about how last week, like, there's no attempts over 20 air yards. And at that point, if you're Cliff in the second half of those games, you're like, what is the point in me calling this deep stuff where my quarterback is exposed, my offensive line is exposed? There's a lot of stuff that could go wrong when I can probably just get 7 yards on a screen, and I don't have any of that risk. And to me, when Jayden showed the willingness to throw it, Cliff was like, okay, let's keep going. Does that track at all with the way you saw it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I think it was the first miss was actually like really encouraging, because it kind of ended up being like that last throw where Jayden had a guy on him. And that's kind of why the throw was off. But it was a well-schemed throw that got McLaurin open off. I think they sending a blitz like kind of from depth. They ended up with single high, and McLaurin is running past them to the corner. And so that was a well-designed play that they had in rhythm. It just kind of, you know, it threw him off because there was a guy in his face. But yeah, being willing to call those and for Jayden to throw them, that's awesome. And like, that's what we've seen from him at LSU. So I think the more you can get comfortable with those and believing that he's going to kind of protect himself on some, like even when the defenders are going to be in his face, I think that's going to definitely be a positive for the offense.
Dan Pizzuta with us here on the Hoffman Show, of course, for the 33rd team. You can check out his work in writing form there. Austin Eckler is going to be out for this one for Washington. When you watch their offense and you try to think about how they replace him, like how significant, like we can go the old school radio 1 to 10 / the scale that everyone uses, like 1 to 10. How big of a deal is the Austin Eckler absence?
It'll be a little bit because he is he's been a good back, but I think the way that Cliff Kingsbury has been able to design the run game, and that's always been like his strongest thing, even in Arizona when the passing offense was kind of up and down. Like there was still a good run offense there, and I think the stress that Jaden Daniels puts on a defense having to defend him in the run game also is going to open up some things. So I think they'll be able to get away with it and still be able to have a decent rushing attack. And I think now with the offense being opened up a little more, that's probably going to open up some more space in the run game too, because now you're going to have to worry about some of those deeper throws, and you're not just going to have defenders sitting on screens and things. So I think that'll also help open up kind of that second level too.
Yeah, I do wonder where some of those screens that have gone to Eckler, which have been explosive plays for them, go. And I surely mean that from like a personnel standpoint. Do they shift some of those to the receivers? Do they use Jeremy McNichols and just run the same stuff and hope for the best? Brian Robinson, obviously, and they've got a couple of guys on practice squad that I'm assuming one of them, if not multiples, get called up. So that'll be something we obviously track into the weekend. Okay, well, that's the happy news. Now we get to the team that has the worst defensive DVOA in the league. It's the same team. It's the Washington Commanders. I guess what I would ask Dan to start is, when you watch that game Monday night, how much of this is like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are awesome, they put up huge numbers, that's going to kill your statistics, versus like, man, Washington is making this so easy for Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow to be awesome?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. It's another answer where it's a little bit of both. I mean, what coming out in single high against the Bengals, I think that's inexcusable just from like a game plan perspective. That's what they feast on. So anytime they saw that, I think we saw it to the deep, that first touchdown, definitely to Jamar Chase, and then throughout the game, whenever they came out in single high, they were just like, okay, like this is what we based our offense on for years, like since Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have been together. So it was one of those. And then I think we kind of saw with Cincinnati willing to, spread the ball around a little bit and have like go to Andre Yoshivas when he was open, and that happened. And Washington does not have the secondary depth to be guarding a third receiver. And when you have the skill that I think Yoshivas does, like he's been a fun player since he came out, and getting that bigger role now with Tyler Boyd not there, and he had that role without T Higgins for that first two games. So having a guy like that they are willing to go to, it stresses a secondary like Washington's too. And then when you're just lining up in single high and man coverage against Jamar Chase, like you're basically just asking for it. I don't know why a team would do that in 2024. That it seems insane to me. And it was like, as soon as you saw it happen and it unfolded, it's like, what did you expect?
Yeah, I'll give you the leeway to try it once. Like if you want to dial up a blitz and you need the bodies and you want to try it once in the first half, and Sainer still gets smoked because poor rookie's out there trying his best in his first game at outside corner after playing in the slot. Okay, when like you need to milk the clock and you need them to dink and dunk down the field just from time score situation standpoint, and you give them a one-on-one late in the game with Jamar Chase, that's the one where I'm like, Joe, what are we doing, man?
Yeah, and that's something like the Bengals will give you, right? Like when they see too high, Joe Burrow will get the ball out quickly because he doesn't always trust the offensive line. That's kind of what they've been built on. Also, that's how they've been beating too high for most of the year, since some of the teams defenses have switched up how they play them because they can't play single high against them. So like he'll throw short, and he'll throw some of those dump offs and check downs and just get the ball out. So if I was game planning, obviously not a defensive coordinator, but like that, I would much rather try to have Cincinnati beat me that way, and like make a guy like Yoshivas beat me on a slant every now and again, instead of leaving those big plays to potentially be there. And that's just a weird. It's still just kind of incomprehensible that was just kind of part of the plan to begin with.
At the same time, I almost feel bad for them because it's like there's no way they played more than 5 or 6. No, certainly no more than 10 snaps of single high. It's just Cincinnati hammered them so thoroughly on those snaps that it stuck out like a sore thumb. So that leads us to this weekend against Arizona, as Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd team is with us for his weekly visit here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Like when you look at Arizona's offense and compare it to Cincinnati's and some of the other offenses that Washington has faced, Kyler's dangerous. Marvin Harrison's sick, but he's still a rookie. James Conner's very dangerous, but the firepower is not the same as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase because few have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. What is the game plan, the strategy against Kyler and the Arizona offense compared to the, like, we can go with zero risk game plan that should have been in place last week?
Yeah, the Arizona offense is it's really fun, and I think one of the things is they're really, I don't think is like a great way to defend it because they are one of these teams that are going to throw a bunch of different personnel looks at the defense and try to make them match up. Now, I think Trey McBride is still in concussion protocol, which is probably going to hinder some of the stuff they've been doing because they've been one of these teams that will come out in 13 personnel with 3 tight ends, but then they'll be passing from it. So they're getting teams to come in and play really heavy and play base, play like a linebacker that probably isn't on the field all that often, that third linebacker. And then they're getting explosive pass plays. And that's where a lot of the things, so like Marvin Harrison Jr. have been down the field. So I think even if they are only using, 2 tight ends, they're still going to come out in a lot of 12. They're going to come out in a lot of like 21. I think they're going to try to make Washington play heavy, but then make that be how they expose them in the pass game. And I think that's going to be really tough because, again, if you play light, Arizona has this really good run game too that still has a lot of the elements that Cliff brought from there. So it is a place where they've been really good at getting openings and explosive runs in a real well schemed up run game. So if you try to play light against some of their, heavier looks, they're just going to run over you. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of thing. So they're a tough offense to defend.
Well, that's interesting because this is why you sign Jeremy Chin. Like, this is why you sign a guy who's a hybrid safety linebacker who can get in and thump and is not like, if they're a nickel, like actually if I'm trying to run on the Commanders, I'm trying to get them in nickel, like true nickel where Sainer still's in there on the inside and like he's a 5'9" rookie. He's tough, but we'll figure it out, as opposed to like, they're in a bigger nickel or a dime situation, or not a dime, but they have Chin in there and kind of their base defense or some kind of 3 safety look. And he's the guy I got to deal with in the box because he's basically a linebacker anyway. And that's where I wonder, like, how do the Commanders, this is super nerdy all of a sudden, but it's fine. Like, how do the Commanders match 12 personnel and McBride being out, making it so that they can't quite dictate to 13 in the heaviest personnel grouping? Like, that actually could be a really big deal this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, that's just kind of the stress that Arizona has been putting on, these defenses for the first couple of weeks, and they've been pulling it off. And Kyler has been, pretty good. He's a little up and down last week against the Detroit defense that was just kind of able to get some pressure. But like he's been making plays, and like he's a guy like Jaden where he can take off. But again, he's one of these guys that if he's outside the pocket, he's still trying to look down the field. It just makes him, one of the most dangerous, quarterbacks in the league. I think, especially this year, the way he's been playing, just kind of the confidence he had after coming back from that injury in the second half of last year. He's so much better than he was, when he came back. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, it's a tough place because I think Arizona is one of these offenses where they're not going to be the best offense like in the league, but I think they are going to like throw out a bunch of things to make things as difficult as possible.
Yeah, Petzing does a great job as the OC, and Kyler this year, it's kind of interesting because he's 5th in total EPA per drop back, but he's 29th against the blitz in EPA per drop back. But I also don't know that I'd want to, like, if you blitz him, you better get there, because if he gets out on the loose and starts running either to run or to throw, like, that's an explosive play waiting to happen. All right, let's circle all the way back around, Dan, then back to the Commanders offense and what we've seen from this Arizona defense. Jonathan Gannon's real good. And the crew they've got in terms of scheme is super interesting. They do a lot of stuff. When we taped Take Command this morning, my guy Logan Paulson said this is he thinks this is the most complex of the 4 defenses that Jaden has seen through 4 starts. What do you like? What do you see when you watch Arizona on that side of the ball?
Yeah, and there is certainly one of these defenses, and it kind of is like the offense, and it goes back to what they did last year too, where they don't have a lot of talent on that side of the ball, but they make up for it by throwing whatever they can against the wall, and something's going to stick and something's going to confuse them. So they're just given a lot of. They're one of these defenses that is going to be doing a lot of like different pre-snap looks and make a lot of the not just the coverages and disguising, but making the fronts really hard to defend. So match quarters from Cody Alexander, they track, the sim pressures, which is, when you have like 5 guys on, you're showing like a pressure or a blitz, and 4 guys are going to rush, but it's not a, traditional 4 guys. It's, it's a safety or something. And Arizona leads the league in that. They do that on 52% of their pass snaps. So they are showing blitz and they're going to rush 4 usually, but you don't know which 4, and the 4th is usually just not a traditional pass rusher. So it's one of those confusing things where you don't really know exactly what you're looking at the line of scrimmage, and that makes it harder. And that's usually either it stops a pass rusher from getting double teamed. It can create a free rusher sometimes, and that's just kind of one of those things. They're just going to throw out a whole bunch of looks, and it's going to make it really tough on the front. It's probably one of those things where attacking quickly it might help, because then that stops from having to hold in the pocket, and it's stopping potentially some of those free rushers or just misidentifying who's coming from really impacting dropbacks on a higher rate. So I could see some of the screens and stuff playing a bigger part here. But yeah, Arizona is just going to be one of those teams that just throws a whole bunch at the wall.
Yeah, it does make me wonder a couple of things with Cliff. Like, he is so good at using formations to give his quarterback information / to protect, in the same way that a lot of teams use motion, right? It's like for a lot of these West Coast guys, it's like, we'll send a guy in motion. That's going to be the thing that either messes up the defense because now they have to communicate or whatever. And for Cliff, he's like, we might just use wide splits and be like, hey, we're going to make sure that if you're going to send a corner, that he's going to have to show that blitz because he's coming from so wide, or he's not going to get there because he's going to have to hold his disguise out wide. And then obviously the screen game takes away. We're playing cover 6 match, just this amoeba nonsense coverage on the back end that's impossible to decipher. It doesn't matter if you throw a screen, as long as you have the good numbers in the box. So I really do feel like, some of the stuff that Cliff does and at times I think frustrates people, but it is also sometimes a strength, can be a real weapon here to help Jaden simplify what is a fairly, as you said, complex defense.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case too. And when you're, especially for a guy like Cliff, who, like you said, uses the formations, then uses the pace to push everything forward. So it is going to be harder if there are very wide splits, and you're not going to be able to. If you're doing complicated things on the front, and then you're asking, one of your edge rushers to kind of drop into coverage, you're really asking a lot of those. And I think we kind of saw that, like, there were teams that were able to put the Rams in a lot of unenviable positions last year when they were doing some of that. Like, they would just have like a 5 down front, but they would have like a 300-pound, like Michael Hawk, who is playing defensive end for them, like, would be dropping like on 25% of his coverages. And then there were teams that just kind of started to exploit that and put them into situations. So I think like Washington could be a team who's able to do some of those things to the Arizona front. But yeah, I think this is going to be a matchup where a stop or 2 is probably going to help, because I think this is one where both offenses still have the advantage on each side of the ball. And if you can kind of just get one thing to go right on defense, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, here's to another week off for Tress Way. Please, no punts. Tress only holding. That's your new job. Dan Pizzuta, read his work at the 33rd team. Always great stuff, dude. It's really fun to kind of dive into the trends from around the league through the lens of the Commanders. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always have a good time.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming on YouTube as well at the Team 980. We are scheduled to catch up with Patrick Peterson here, the 2010s All-Decade Corner, who is now our newest Odyssey Sports NFL insider. But we are having some issues getting hold of Pat. So once we figure out the disconnect, we'll get connected, and then hopefully we'll have Patrick on the show. If not, everybody's fired. Do I have the power to do that, Anthony?
I don't think it works like that, Craig.
Oh, okay.
I think I've told you this before. I don't think it works like that.
I can't just say stuff and have it happen?
I mean,
there's certain look. There's stuff I could say where I get fired.
Yeah.
If it actually were to make the radio airwaves, you would get fired because there's a button that you could hit to make sure it doesn't get there.
Yep.
I'd still probably be in trouble for saying it. Especially now that we go to the stream. There's no dump button on the stream. So, yeah. So in lieu of that, Anthony, I see you staring at the phone. I thought he was calling. No, you're just monitoring in case he does.
Yeah, I'm monitoring it, but I'm gonna pull up my VX producer because that actually lights up. Sometimes the light over here doesn't hit me all the way, so I don't see it right away. But yeah, I got my VX.
See, Anthony's locked in coverage right now. He's got to lock on and focus for a long time, which transitions us nicely to talking about the Arizona Cardinals. We can start talking about the Cardinals a little bit because we did take command this morning, and so I've watched a little bit of film for them, and obviously Logan and I spent a good long time talking about what we have seen from Arizona. And I think the thing that like stands out to me with Arizona is there is a like huge boomer bust with them when it comes to Kyler. Like, and I think that's in part because the biggest boom and bust plays in football come on blitzes. As we saw on Monday night, you blitz Jaden Daniels, you leave Terry McLaurin on the outside one-on-one, bada bing, bada bam, you hit him in the face, doesn't matter, he gets that ball out. Huge play. If you want to go single high and blitz Joe Burrow, like, okay, Benjamin St. Juste, you're in trouble, buddy. Mike Sainristil, you're in trouble, buddy. Jamar Chase getting touchdowns. Like, those plays happen often against pressure because quarterbacks know I've got one-on-one and I have to get the ball out now, and there's a risk that I'm willing to take, and I can't sit back here and read out the pocket and make sure that I have a guy that's open. I don't necessarily care what the full coverage is. As long as I know this is one-on-one, I'm just going to have to trust my guy to make it. With Kyler, the boom bust, height, potential, all that stuff, like the boom bust nature of things changes a little bit from a dynamic standpoint because for him, if you get pressure at all, and this is blitz or no blitz, you are risking him running, and that is a bad thing. But if you get no pressure, like he is good enough to dice you from the pocket. And in some ways, there's almost like this perfect rush for Kyler Murray that if the Commanders can pull off, which in some ways I think they're built to, then they can, I think, have a lot of success. And Detroit did this very well. First, Detroit stopped the run at a very, very high rate. And that really wrecked Drew Petzing's plan. Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator, does a really good job in Arizona. And so his ability to keep them in bad down and distance, or Detroit's ability to keep Arizona in bad down and distance limits the playbook, gets them out of some of their boot actions and play actions and things that they like to do with Kyler to help move the pocket, and puts him in straight drop back where he's not as good. And then they did a really great job of just like collapsing the pocket from outside in. And, we talked so much last year with Sam Howell about the height stuff, and does a short quarterback actually have a disadvantage? And you can see at times with Kyler, when you watch him on tape, he can't see. And there's just a reality to being 5'9" in a pocket that is created by 6'4" guards, or 6'2" or 6' something guards, and a 6'7" tackle or whatever it is, that you can't see over. And if you're Jaden Daniels and you're 6'4", like, you can see the middle of the field. You can see cleanly to the outside. You can see the short passes where Kyler actually pushes the ball downfield at one of the highest rates in the NFL. I think in part, Anthony, because he can see down there. Like if you got something right in front of you, you can peek up over and like, oh, there's Marvin Harrison down there. Oh, I'm gonna throw him the ball. And as a result, I actually looked this up this morning, the old next gen stats of it all. Kyler Murray has thrown past the sticks at the 6th highest rate in 2024. 43% of his passes go past the first down marker. So on first down, that's going to be 10 plus, and then second or third and whatever. Like and by the way, a lot of times he is looking for Marvin Harrison Jr., who, according to the NFL's next gen stats, ranks 3rd in targets. He's got 20 of them, and is tied for 4th in receptions, 3rd in target, 4th in receptions, and 4th in receiving yards on targets past the sticks. So if you can collapse the pocket and keep Kyler in it, he is going to probably turtle, and you're going to get higher sack totals than they've had in any game this year. And if that doesn't happen, well, then he gets out of the pocket. Like you're bad in your rush lanes. You get out of the pocket, or he gets out of the pocket, and then Anthony, you know what happens then? You're dead.
Do you think this is a game where a guy like Jamin, who has a linebacker background, flourishes, or just because him, Frankie Louvu, who are some of our other like fast linebackers?
I mean, Dante Fowler in theory, like
they
ends from the edge
that
position. Yeah, you're talking about pure linebacker. I thought about that with Jamin this morning, right? Because we know Furl's out, and so how do you distribute the backup reps behind him? I think Dante Fowler is probably more trustworthy in that he's a veteran, right? When it comes, if Dan Quinn goes to Dante Fowler and is like, look, dude, I need you to execute X. Dante Fowler will do X. He might not do X spectacularly, but he also was probably their best edge. He's been their best edge rusher this season in terms of juice. But like, he can be trusted that, hey, you can't get too high in your pass rush. For Jamin, it's new. It's not that he's going to forget, but like he can get washed and be worked by an offensive tackle easier. But because I think the reason I thought about Jamin, though, is like if Kyler does escape the pocket, I trust Jamin to chase him down.
Yeah, I'm thinking about using our linebackers or somebody like a Jamin as a spy, just because we know how dangerous Kyler is outside of the pocket. Kind of.
I don't like spies.
Okay.
Because it takes a player out of both coverage and the rush. So you are almost, it's not even like you're playing with 10. It's almost like you're playing with 9. Because you have now taken a player that could either be in the rush or in coverage, and you've put him in no man's land. Now, if he winds up chasing down the quarterback, that can be really helpful and prevent big plays. So it's not like spies are useless. You know, if you've got a 3rd and long situation and you're going to rush 3 and you want to spy because you want to do whatever on the back end and you want to make sure that you have eyes on the quarterback, okay, fine. Or if you want to maybe as part of a pressure package, you're playing man on the back end. So a quarterback, when they see man, often, hey, I'm seeing the backs of jerseys, I'm going to take off and run. It's safe to run because nobody's watching me like they are in zone with their eyes are on the quarterback. As part of a rush package, we maybe take a guy out of the rush. That way, if the quarterback flushes, you don't have that clean escape. I'm fine with a spy that's well used, but often, like, I'm not the biggest spy fan. I just would prefer guys actually, do their jobs with discipline and have a good rush plan and rush together and make sure there aren't silly gaps for Kyler to get out of and rush for 30 yards.
Yeah, I think just as we did, last game where we were sending guys from everywhere. And, the Bengals sort of kind of did a good job of, picking everybody up that we were sending.
They did it good enough, and Burrow's amazing at getting the ball out quickly.
Yeah, that too. I was more so just thinking, if we disguise it, the correct way, maybe Jamin gets, lost in the blitz as a spy kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
I do think
disengage.
Yeah. I do think that can be a thing, right? Is like sometimes, yes, as part of a pressure package, do you have one guy that maybe lays back a little bit, that stays clean, that he's not engaged with an offensive lineman so that if the quarterback takes off, he can go get him? Yeah, that can be possible. And there's different like green dogs and things like that where like, you fake blitz, but then you're in man-to-man on the running back. If the running back stays in because he thought you were blitzing, then you actually do blitz. And sometimes those players get caught behind and wind up kind of getting cleanup sacks as a quarterback gets, flushed. Like there's all kinds of different situations.
Yeah.
You can find a million different, what you want to call it, amalgamations of how pressure can work. But I think the biggest thing with Kyler is like, if he's in the pocket and you have good rush integrity, you are limiting what he can do as a passer. And he is so dangerous on the run. And we didn't even talk about like what happens when he scrambles to throw. So many of those down the field throws are that he is, there are like, I'm trying to think if there's a fourth guy that I want to put in here. But I truly think that, like, if I were to say the top three guys, here's the analogy I used on Take Command this morning. If we're playing quarterback horse, right, we have to come up with some crazy throw. I'm going to roll out to my left and throw the ball between my legs, whatever. Mahomes is the number one pick, right? The number one guy you pick to compete with him is Josh Allen, because Josh Allen has a stupid arm and can throw from off platform, any angle, whatever. And, buddy, let me tell you, watching some Bills tape back because they played the Cardinals week 1, oh my God, is he fun. I know how well he's playing. Again, every time I talk about Josh Allen now, I remember that I'm actually rubbing it into Anthony because he said he was overrated. And I'm not doing that on purpose, but then I also feel weird if I don't acknowledge it. So we're just going to keep it moving. But, man, fun to watch. The third guy I would pick in quarterback horse in the NFL, I think, is Kyler. He's that talented off platform. And he can get to spots because he's super fast and he's super quick. And then he can make any throw in the book because he has that baseball background of just like, I can throw from awkward arm angles. Caleb might be the next guy because he's like that too. But Kyler's like in that class of creativity. He's not that class of passer, but he is in that class of creativity.
No, I would agree. He is. I mean, he has I guess all these guys with the baseball backgrounds that can run and sidearm and do all that.
It's something that you learn playing infield.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have good footwork. You have to be able to throw off platform. You have to be able to make stuff happen quickly. You throw from different arm angles. You make it work. And if you can then translate that to football, it can be pretty potent. Okay, if we catch up with Pat P, we'll talk to Pat P. If not, then we won't. And we'll talk about Thursday Night Football next. We'll never read the comments coming up at 5:30. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 5:30, it'll be Never Read the Comments. Right now, though, I do think, Anthony, give me a thumbs up if we are good. Perhaps, maybe. Anthony? Yes? No? Okay, we are good. In just a moment here, we are going to welcome in our newest Odyssey NFL insider, Patrick Peterson, host of the Odyssey original podcast, First in Pod. Insider calls are brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Mayo game day be delicious. And with that, we welcome in the 2010s all-decade team member, Patrick Peterson. Pat P, what's up, dude? How are you?
Oh, what up, Craig? Happy to be on with you, man. What's happening?
I'm glad to have you. By the way, the fact that we have all of us around the country have to introduce you, and the last thing you're going to hear before we welcome you on all of our shows is Mayo game day be delicious. What a career you had to earn that, man. What I just can't. Can you just sometimes look around as you get into this media space and be like, I cannot believe it has come to this?
Man, Craig, I actually had to pinch myself maybe like yesterday when someone was introducing me and all of those, giving me all my accolades and, all of those things. And I was like, wow, I really have accomplished a lot and, pretty much, accomplished the goals that I set out for myself as an individual for my NFL career. So I'm very, very pleased where I ended up throughout my NFL career, Craig.
Yeah, as you should be. And again, thanks to the sponsors. We appreciate the sponsors. I will say, though, Pat, in some of our YouTube comments and people on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, is the Commanders have struggled at corner this year. Your name has come up. So I have to ask, because otherwise the fan base will riot. Are you definitely 100% done as a player? / if Adam Peters called you and was like, hey, dude, we need some help at corner, do you have any interest in playing? Or are you like, I don't need any more guards running at me on a GT power play?
Craig, I do have aspirations of playing again. So mentally I'm not physically, mentally I'm not, completely shutting it down. But I haven't got that phone call yet. I'm still working out, still doing the things I need to do to make sure if that phone does ring to a contender that whenever I do show up, that I'm giving them the best that I got. You know what I mean? Because at this stage of my career, I want to compete for a championship. So if Washington is in those conversations and they continue to need help, with corner down the line, yeah, my phone line is open.
All right, I'm sure Adam Peters has your agent's number. Just now I've asked, and now we go, and we'll see where they go. Obviously, they are 2-1 this season, so far more towards the contender status than perhaps a lot of people thought going into the year. But Pat, let's talk about the defense that has struggled statistically. There's all kinds of stuff that says they're just really bad. The tape is not good, and I think for them it probably starts up front. But speaking from a corner's perspective, that marriage of pass rush and coverage, how important was it for you during your career? Because, you had stretches where you were arguably the best corner in football. And for you could probably just lock down a side and you're like, go ahead, make my job difficult. It'll be a more interesting day at the office. But for most teams and team defense, that marriage between pass rush and coverage, is it possible to say where it starts, or is it really a chicken and egg thing where one has so much effect on the other and it's this vicious cycle if one of them is not playing well?
Man, honestly, it depends on what type of scheme that you're running, because if you go back and look at the early part of my career in Arizona, I didn't have no dominant pass rusher. I had Calais Campbell. He was an interior guy. He wasn't, coming off the edge that's able to, force the quarterback to step up. So I really never had a serious pass rusher till about year 7 when we was able to acquire Chandler Jones. So for me, a lot of situations is different. And we was in a man-to-man scheme to where we didn't care what the guys did up front. Yeah, we know it started up there that those guys needed to stop the run. But for the most part, we didn't care what those guys did up front because we knew we was going to be man-to-man. We knew we didn't have any help over the top for the most part. We're just on the island 9 times out of 10. So when I had those assignments, I really wasn't worried about, what the guys up front was doing. If they got to the pass rusher, yeah, so be it. But as I got older as the athletic ability of not the athletic ability, but the speed started to dwindle a little bit. Now you're able to, rely on the pass rusher because you're not able to cover as long. So that's why I said it depends on what scheme that you're in, or, whatever scheme that the defense is running, to be able to lean on a certain position group. Because in Seattle, back in the Legion of Boom days, those guys, they was a Legion of Boom, but they leaned on their front four to apply pressure to force the quarterbacks to force turnovers. When I was in Arizona, it was all about the back end. It was all about man-to-man, zero coverage. We're going to apply the pressure and put the pressure on our back end to cover us up. So it just all depends on what type of scheme that the defense is running.
Yeah, it definitely feels like here in Washington, they are definitely trying to lean on that front, and it's not going great so far. But there was another part of that answer, Pat, that I think is interesting, because you talk about, hey, the one thing we did rely upon them is to stop the run. And I look at this matchup against Arizona and the way that Arizona, one, can just straight up run the heck out of the football, and two, all the play action and boot and waggle stuff they do with Kyler that is off of their ability to run it, because he's not necessarily a guy that at 5'9" is just going to sit in the pocket and pick you apart. But when he can get out and use his mobility, he's as deadly as any quarterback there is in the league. So how does that affect the back end if a play caller, in this case Arizona's Drew Petzing, has to become one-dimensional and they can't really run the football effectively?
In my opinion, that's what you want to kind of make Arizona be, as like a one-dimensional football team. And yeah, they have been putting up some big numbers as far as the rushing attempts, but you want to kind of make them one-dimensional, whatever the case may be. So whatever they do well going into the game, if they run the ball well, if they pass the ball well, you want to take that out of the game. We want to try to make them beat us. I'm speaking as a defense coordinator.
Right.
You want to try to make them beat us with their left hand. So if they run the ball well, yeah, we want to stack the box. And if we feel like Kyler Murray is not a capable quarterback that's willing enough to beat us with his arm, we're going to stack the box and force them to beat us with their left hand. We understand Kyler Murray will make those, extra time, create extra time for those pass plays, but we're going to be able to live with that, because now we're going into practice understanding that as a back end, we are going to have extra. We are going to have to cover guys extra on the back end. So now it's not going to be 4 seconds. We got to think more of a 6 to 8 second rule. So now we got to be in coverage a little bit longer. So now if that's their case, we can't allow backyard football to beat us. We're going to stop the run, and it can't allow backyard football to beat us, and see if they can beat us with their left hand. That's me as a defensive coordinator going into this ball game.
Always easier said than done, but that seems like it'll be Joe Witt's plan on Sunday. Patrick Peterson, our Odyssey Sports NFL Insider, with us again. Insider calls are brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. You can purchase Hellman's at your local Walmart, Kroger, or grocery store to add extra deliciousness and creamy flavor to your game day dishes this football season. The other big storyline in the defensive secondary for Washington this weekend is hopefully the return of Emmanuel Forbes, the former first-round pick, who obviously has had his ups and downs, to say the least. Pat, when you either yourself had any issues during your career with up and down play, or you had a teammate, especially a younger teammate, who had a tough time and maybe need to regain confidence, how do you try to go about that as a defensive back? And have you watched Emmanuel specifically? And if you have any notes on him, I'd be definitely curious what you think of him.
Yeah, I think Emmanuel is going to be a good player in this league. It all comes down to just confidence and being able to have that experience. That's what I believe it comes down to, because a lot of young guys who come into the league, yeah, they had a lot of experience on the college level, but when they get into the league, these are grown men. So, and there's no holds bars about your performance as far as what's being discussed upstairs, in the meeting rooms, in the locker room, in the showers, or whatever the case may be. So it's a whole different perspective that these guys are coming in. But for me, when I went through those stretches of games, or had a moment throughout the season, all you have to do is just rely on the ability that the God-given ability that got you there. You know what I mean? So the game. At some point, it may be something that may be distracting you off the field. Something may be holding you back, or you may not feel happy with something elsewhere. you got to come to a realization that, this is my livelihood. So whatever's going on outside of this locker room, it don't matter, because I have to put my best foot forward, each and every day when I step into this building in order to get out the fulfillment of what I want out of my career. And that's been the thing I've seen, throughout my 13 years and throughout my 13-year career, that guys don't understand how to separate the two lives, because there are two lives. Yeah, we are NFL players, but when we leave that building, we're a normal human being. So we got to be able to understand how to juggle both of the lives that we're into right now. So I believe that's the biggest thing of, younger guys that's coming into the league right now. They're having trouble on understanding how to handle both bubbles. There's a real life bubble, and then there's an NFL bubble. You know what I mean? When
right.
you get both of those bubbles into one, they don't correlate, especially if you don't have one or the other under control.
No, that makes sense. And I think the older I get covering this league and doing the job that I do, like the more I appreciate how young these guys are when they get into the league. And it's a lot to handle. And that's why, organizations are spending millions of dollars at this point in support for players in a way that they never did in the past, which is great. And obviously Washington's building up that infrastructure. I got two more questions for you, Pat. I definitely want to let you talk about your fellow LSU Tiger and Jaden Daniels before we go. But one more defensive backs question for you that I've always kind of had a theory, and now I get to ask one of the best to do it in the last 25 years of the league. So I'm going to ask you this. How dependent is that position on coaching and scheme? So I think about Emmanuel as a guy who played so much man-to-man and single high type of coverages in college and really excelled at that, and now is being asked to play different techniques, a lot more cover two, and has had time struggles adjusting to that in the league. So how dependent is the cornerback position specifically on coaching at the NFL level?
I won't necessarily say it's very dependent in the National Football League. But guys, like you just said, guys who's coming out of the college level, there's guys who was man-to-man guys like myself. There are guys who are like Richard Sherman, who played with more vision, so who understand more spacing in defensive coverages. Versus a guy like me, I'm playing with my back towards the quarterback. I'm literally following the receiver around the yard. Wherever he goes, I'm going. So when you get into the NFL, there's multiple schemes. There's, cover twos, cover three schemes, cover four schemes, there's man-to-man schemes, there's fire zone schemes. So therefore, you have to be able to adapt to whatever the player who you're drafting, what they do well. So, like for me, when I came into the game, like my eyes was like really, really bad because I was used to just having my eyes on a specific guy. So then when I was asked to play cover three or cover four, I wasn't as comfortable as that because now my eyes are wandering because I'm so used to watching one guy.
Right.
So that's what defensive coordinators going to have to do, a good job of when they're scouting these guys out of college. What scheme are they coming from? Are they going to be able to fit in our scheme? Because I believe that's another thing. That's why you don't see a lot of guys that last as well in the league as well, because you might have a guy coming from a zone concept and he's getting drafted to a man-to-man scheme. That don't correlate. So
right.
Therefore, there's a slight chance that this guy's going to be successful. So I just think, they just have to do a better job of making sure that guys who they really, really want can really meet their standards of, what they're looking for out of their scheme.
Yeah, and I also think of guys like Nnamdi Asomugha, who were incredible in one scheme, signed free agent-wise with another team, and then they're out of the league a couple
right.
years later. And it's like, yeah, well, if he was good there and not good there, it's that that change in scheme. And that's kind of the guy, or one of the guys I was thinking about with that theory. So that's definitely great insight to hear and kind of how that plays out. All right, last but not least, your fellow LSU Tiger, Jaden Daniels, just had one of the greatest performances we've seen in a long time by a rookie in the league period. One of the best primetime performances we've seen by a quarterback. What have you seen from Jaden through 3 games?
Man, past the 3 games, man, when he was back at LSU, the last 2 seasons, I always felt that he was going to be a guy whenever he had his opportunity, he was going to be, special, because you saw the growth year after year and the confidence grow year after year. And now to see, what it has become, I'm not surprised at all. That game he had last week against the Cincinnati Bengals was just remarkable on all facets of the game, as far as managing the game, as far as clutch moments in the game, as far as impact player in the game. Like, he answered all of those questions, in that one ball game, and he's been answering a lot of questions throughout the first 3 weeks of this season. So it's remarkable to see a fellow, LSU Tiger shine in the NFL and continue to make LSU proud, because, that's one of the positions that we always been lacking, was the quarterback position. So him and Joe Burrow are doing a great job of representing the LSU Tigers at that position for sure.
Yeah, everyone is just hurting for you. You guys at DBU, wide receiver U. Oh, no, they have quarterbacks now. Oh, God. Cry for LSU. Pat, this was awesome, dude. I really appreciate the time very much. I mean, I hope you get that shot to go compete for a ring. It would be a hell of a cherry on top for what was an incredible career. But for as long as you're on our team here at Odyssey, we'd love to have you back on the show sooner rather than later. Appreciate the time, man.
All right, Craig. Thanks for having me. I hope to talk to you guys soon.
Absolutely. That's Patrick Peterson, everybody, our Odyssey NFL insider and host of the Odyssey Original Podcast. First in Pod, Insider Calls brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. May your game day be delicious. When we get back, never read the comments. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming on YouTube at the Team 980. And if you just missed Patrick Peterson, you missed one heck of an interview. You should definitely check that out in the podcast feed, the Rewind app, or that thing's going on YouTube ASAP lickety split. So we'll get the video up here in just a moment. However, right now, speaking of YouTube, it is time for Never Read the Comments.
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, here we go. You leave your comments at the Team 980, at Craig Hoffman. We read them. We scan through the hundreds, if not thousands, that we get, and we pick out the ones that we want to respond to here on the radio. We always start with a little amuse-bouche, if you will, get us in the right mood, Anthony. And so here's our comment sampler appetizer today. Carlos Allen 4616 says, so and this was in response to my 1st and 10, which, by the way, the number one thing I said about Jaden Daniels is a star is born. So a 3-game rookie quarterback gets nitpicked after 90% completion percentage, no turnovers, and a game-sealing TD pass. Craig, you need to quit it. I honestly don't remember what I nitpicked, Anthony. If I picked nits, I think I said, like, here's where he wasn't literally perfect, which is an unreasonable standard. I guess if that's nitpicking, I'm guilty. But the reason I picked this out, Anthony, because I think it's so funny that literally the next comment on the same video, I believe was Marco Antonellino said, I have seen a lot of videos this week of what we did well, but I can't seem to find the critical ones of what we can do better.
I am in tears.
Those were, I don't know if they're actually on the same videos because I was just scrolling through the comments and they're chronological, but the two comments left back to back somewhere on my YouTube page were me nitpicking Jaden Daniels' Monday night performance and then someone complaining that they haven't found the videos where we were critical of the team.
Do you think that's sarcasm by chance?
Maybe. That would actually make a lot more sense. Although, like, we obviously talked about the defense, and yikes, bro. So there's so I would say, Marco Antonellino, you should go check out the video where a lot of our comments today come from, where we talk about how the Commanders' defense is dead-ass last in DVOA, and the 5th worst in DVOA defensively since the stat was originated in 1979. Speaking of, Go Caps DMV said on that video, someone has to be last. Wait, we're last. Yep, Rome was not built in a day. And I appreciate the humor, because look, there's going to be some rough spots this year. There is going to be some times where things don't go great, and that's not just for the defense, where they've already had 3 games worth, if we're being honest. That's going to go for Jaden Daniels, because he's a rookie. He's not going to be this good the entire year. That's impossible. Again, he probably, just based off sheer math, set his career high in completion percentage for his career on Monday night. He's not going to do that again ever, and that's fine. He has completed 91% of his passes. So we're going to have a chuckle and a laugh for our sanity at some point this year. With that said, it is worth pointing out that we are early in this rebuild, even if it's going well, and they're sitting at 2-1. So there is that. As for where the blame goes for the defense not playing up to par, Hillam Adventures 4060 says, this also sits at the feet of the previous regime with all the terrible first-round picks, bad defensive roster building decisions, then leaving the defensive cupboard bare. 7 new defensive starters this season. Yeah. And as I've said before, often during this segment, in fact, but I've said many times, like, the best players in the league aren't available through free agency. There's a reason that Adam Peters wants to build through the draft, and that is because that is where you get your stars. Rarely do star players, maybe 1 or 2 a year, who just, they got, like T. Higgins, right? T. Higgins is a bona fide star receiver who's probably next year going to be a free agent because Cincinnati can't afford to keep him. It would be reckless roster building because they're going to pay Jamar Chase, or maybe they won't. And maybe Jamar Chase winds up actually hitting the market, in which case then you would have a true superstar to the caliber that you typically do not have hit the market. because the absolute blue chippers in this league, and I would argue that T. Higgins isn't even that. T. Higgins is a red chip, not a blue chip. Top 25, top 30, definitely. Top 5 at his position? No, he's great, but he's not that good. Jamar Chase, he's that good. And so those types of players don't hit free agency. They occasionally get traded. Often if there's mitigating circumstances of some kind, see Trent Williams, unfortunately, as if I had to remind everybody. But by and large, your best players, the best players, they spend their primes with the teams that drafted them, and it's because they get acquired through the draft. And so building a team on the fly is really, really, really hard, because even if they drafted, let's say Mike Sainristil turns into a multiple-time all-pro cornerback, becomes the best nickel in the league, he's still a rookie right now. And it's going to take time for him to develop into that. So I do think mostly it's just the reality of the process. Couple of funny ones here as we have a short edition of Never Read the Comments today. Anthony, have you went back and watched the 4th down completion to Luke McCaffrey from the game the other night?
Talking about where he kept going, like he looked in the first window, wasn't there, and kept going.
Yeah, which, like, that's the analysis, right? Oh, what a job by Luke, what a job by Jaden to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
I need to send you the end zone angle of that, because on Take Command, Logan and I were talking about that play, and he goes, I don't think that Luke McCaffrey was the intended target.
Who was?
I went back and watched it. We literally stopped the podcast.
Now I want to watch it.
We stopped the podcast. You need to watch the end zone angle. So if you don't have, you have your NFL Pro, right?
Yes.
Just go search in NFL Pro on like by player, search Jaden Daniels, and then go to play situation and hit 4th down. That's going to be the easiest way to find it. And then watch the end zone angle, because Jaden does read multiple guys. He comes back across, and Noah Brown hooks up, 5-yard curl, sits down right where Jaden is looking. Like, you watch his helmet stripe, he looks at Noah Brown, he throws, and Luke McCaffrey comes and intercepts the ball, and then runs another 25 yards. And Sisodia21 says, Craig, I think Logan is right that Jaden was actually throwing to Noah on the 4th down play, as he seemed to allude to that when he was asked in the post-game presser. I thought he was confused about the play he was asked about, but now makes sense. Thanks for the great content, as always, guys.
Oh, wow. I mean, either way, we have the completion, but
do we have the Jaden postgame sound by any chance? I should have prepped you on that. That's my bad.
I think possibly. Let me
look in it for that. Him talking about that 4th down completion, because I swear I might have this one. I might have to tweet out. I might have to go pull and tweet this one out. But he definitely, it's good process. It would have been a completion. I think Noah Brown's open. I think he would have caught it. Ball looked like it was going to be placed well. It was going to hit him right between the 8 and the 5. And then Luke McCaffrey was like, it's going to hit me between the 1 and the 2, and he just kept on running.
Okay.
So there's one to go watch when you get home, if you're not home as you consume this right now. Then we got some caller on caller crime. We'll see if we can find this out later, Anthony. Caller on caller crime. Our old guy Marvin. Remember, he called during draft season or after draft season talking about how Brandon Coleman's not that good. They should have definitely taken Kingsley Suamataia, who went to the Chiefs. TDZ CX50T says, Marvin's punching air right now. Next time he calls in, ask him why his boy Suamataia got benched when he squared up against Trey Hendrickson versus Coleman, who had him on his butt multiple times.
Dang, Suamataia got benched.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he probably would have been the backup anyway, but the starter was hurt, and so he kind of got benched, but it's more of like they were willing to take a little bit more risk when they probably would have wanted to give their guy in Kansas City another week.
Yeah.
But still, yeah, Coleman's probably played better than Suamataia so far. He's a young player who is going to need some development. Still might be good. Like, I am not going to judge people's entire careers based off 3 games. I am going to laugh at commenter on caller violence because I think it's funny. Which brings us to one of our most famed calls of the offseason from Shane from Oxon Hill. If you need a refresher, this was Shane from Oxon Hill.
The guy had 11 touchdowns over the past 2 years. Terry McLaurin has 9. Olamide Zaccheaus had 10 catches last year. Diami Brown had 100 yards last year. Are we a better team without Jahan Dotson? No, we're not. So stop all the baloney, man. We traded Montez Sweat, and now we have Cleveland Furrow, who had 2 sacks. and Dante Fowler, who had 2 sacks. We have Austin Eckler, who is 30 years old. Like, come on, bro. Kendall Fuller is in Miami. Curtis Samuel is in Buffalo. Cam Curl is in with the Rams. And we have a guy, Adam Peters, who's bringing in bums. And everybody's like, oh, just because we're bringing in new faces mean we're better.
That was Shane from Oxon Hill. As you might imagine, with Jahan Dotson not exactly killing it in Philly, and some of the players that he mentioned, like Austin Eckler, unfortunately out this week, but absolutely crushing it so far in DC, that TikTok has caught the algorithm again, Anthony. It is suddenly coming across people's screens. And so Dark Side Reviews 4455 or 4452 says, this is not aging well. Eric Huffman 98, aged like milk. Dotson sucks. That's harsh. Be more Akuma. Eating crow yet? And then you got this one, which I actually thought was the most funny. Kevin Gratonic 8812. I bet he has changed his opinion after Monday night against Cincy. Actually, I hated getting rid of Montez Sweat. Some things are going to take longer to age poorly than others. I think when they take the money they would have paid Montez Sweat and pay someone else, then Kevin will be on board with that one. But man, I was like, why is this? Oh, why? Yeah. That's why it's getting so many comments.
Eckler.
Yeah. Actually, I want to check something real quick.
Are you about to see how many sacks Montez Sweat has?
No, I need. It was Zacchaeus, De'Ami Brown, and Austin Eckler. Those were the players that he was complaining about. So far this year, Olamide Zacchaeus, we're going to need stats. Austin Eckler, we need stats. Jahan Dotson has been targeted 5 times. He has 3 catches for 14 yards. So 3 catches, 14 yards for Jahan Dotson in 3 games. Olamide Zacchaeus has 4 catches for 29 yards. De'Ami Brown has 4 catches for 33 yards. Austin Eckler has 5 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. And he also has, I need receiving, please. That's 5, 9, and I can't even do, he's got well over 100 yards receiving. So literally every player that he named in that call has more production individually than Jahan Dotson. Oh, I'm sorry. Jahan Dotson.
Wow. Jahan.
Good job, Shane. Good job.
Not good.
And that's Never Read the Comments. And a reminder why we never read the comments. When we get back, Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt Jr. took to the podium out in Arizona. We'll let you hear what they had to say in our Pick 6 at 6. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. One heck of a show. We had a great chat earlier with our guy Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd Team, who joins us every single Thursday. And then at 5:15 today, we had Patrick Peterson, of course, the longtime NFL corner, who is now one of our Odyssey Sports insiders. And he was great talking about the Commanders defense and then a little bit about his guy, Jaden Daniels, of course, the fellow LSU Tiger. But our eyes are on the defense to get our pick six started tonight. You hear from Cliff Kingsbury in about 15 minutes. But right now, let's get things started with Joe Witt.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
You got two sides of the ball that are kind of trending in opposite directions. For the defense, obviously, it is not good statistically. Although the trend, maybe that's not even fair. The trend is slightly better than it has been for the defense. The problem is they've started in such a hole that is a very, very relative statement. Let's get to Joe Witt's thoughts on it for number one.
Number 1.
As Joe Witt was asked, is this defense playing the way you wanted? I'm guessing you could guess his answer.
Not the identity that we want to be. You know, we haven't played the brand of football that I was hoping for up until this point. And like I said, that's on me. We want to be a team that produces the ball. We haven't. Now the hitting, I think we're hitting the way that we want to. But you know, we talk about energy. There goes the phone again. Energy. Creating ball, and we're not necessarily doing that all the way. So this is not the style that I envision right now, but we're trending that way. I can't. Grown man can't make him do anything.
I guess that was someone's phone going off in the middle of the press conference, which is always a good time. Look, Dan Quinn said it yesterday, Joe Witt today. This is not what they want. They're not going to sit here and lie to us. The numbers are horrendous. Their DVOA is dead last. Their yards per this, their points per that. Like, none of it's good. They're 4th worst in the league in yards, 4th worst in the league in scoring. It's not good. They're giving up explosive plays. They're not generating turnovers. Like, literally none of it is what they want. They're just trying to get guys to do what they want more often. And there is a little bit more of that week after week. And there is a long way to go. Up front, there's ways to go in the back end. Their linebackers have probably been the most consistent group, but like Bobby Wagner's got some stuff he's got to clean up. Frankie Luvu's got some stuff he needs to clean up. But these are smart guys. They're pushing a lot of good buttons. And I think ultimately they will get them going in the right direction. Number 2, please.
Number 2.
Of course, the safety group has gotten a whole lot of attention, maybe a little bit less this week because Jeremy Chin played his best game as a Commander so far. Quan Martin continues to be highlighted as a guy who is playing the way they want, fast, physical, delivering blows, doing, a lot of good stuff. Even if I think there's a couple things he clearly needs to clean up. But Joe Witt was asked about the safety group and could perhaps Derek Forrest work his way back into that group as someone who hasn't seen the field yet.
Right now, like I said earlier, that we haven't found the group that's going to go out there each week. I'm still waiting on a couple guys just to say, hey, I'm the guy that's going to just do this each weekend, and I don't care who it is. It could be somebody that hasn't played yet. It could be Chig. I don't care. I just want somebody to say, hey,
I got DQ now.
Go out here and play
Derek Forrest next
football right now, and so that's what I'm looking for.
And I think that's interesting. And it's a good reminder that just because these guys aren't playing doesn't mean they're not practicing. So a guy like Defoe, and he said Chig as in Chiganuzium there, the corner, could he be a guy that steps up if he shines in practice? Yeah, we could get a surprise because we don't see practice. So I guess the follow-up then is, hey, how's Derek Forrest practicing?
Forrest has done everything that we've asked him to do. He missed some time early, and I'm not down. I'm actually really high on Forrest, and he's somebody that when we can get more safety packages, that first off we have to get up and then get him on the field. But he's done everything. He's a great teammate. He's a great human being. And now we just got to find a way to get him on the field in certain spaces.
I'm sure they would love to, but they're limited by the active roster, and there's only so many safeties they're going to have, and whatever they would want to use Defoe for is not over what they use Jeremy Chin for. It's not over what they use Quan Martin for. It's not over what they use Percy Butler for, and Tyler Owens is the best special teams player of the bunch, outside of perhaps the former All-Pro special teamer Jeremy Reeves. And so, unless one of those dudes goes down, I see I see it difficult to find the path for Defoe to get on the field. And I do think like sometimes coaches will say, hey, he's doing everything we've asked, as a nice way to say like he's doing everything we've asked, but he's not better than the other guys. They don't want to say that part out loud because they don't want to put down their guy. I'm a commentator, not a coach, so I will say like the stuff that Jeremy Chin does in terms of like fitting runs and some of the really dirty work that maybe goes less appreciated. Like Jeremy Chin's really, really good at that stuff. And you saw it last week as they got him in the box more and were able to do some stuff. And that's going to be super important this week against this Arizona Cardinals team. Like this is a week where a guy like Defoe maybe could be really helpful, but like not over Chin. And so I'm curious to see if that evolves. Obviously, it's rare that everyone in a position group stays healthy, so there's always a chance. And it's good to hear that Defoe is doing the things they want, and maybe he could, make some plays if he got a chance. I'm not going to rule it out as impossible that if he makes a play in Week 10, like, oh, we told you. I never said Defoe wasn't a good football player. It's just that I don't think he's better, and he hasn't shown to be better, obviously, to them than these other guys, and so he's still on the inactive list. As for the active inactives at corner, that's going to be an interesting watch this week. Number three. We got the corners rotating a bit, which I also think is interesting. And I told you guys on Monday, I really liked, or I guess Tuesday, I really liked the decision they made last week at corner to put Sainer still on the outside, play a lot of zone. Obviously, they put him in one really bad spot against Chase, but like, okay, that was one. He got beat by Jamar Chase. He's not the first, and he won't be the last. But ultimately, like Mikey did a pretty good job, had a couple of nice, really big plays, but it also took him out of the slot when they had Noah Igbenogany as their next guy up, and Noah's a better slot than he is outside. And so you got a little more physical in the slot. You got a little bit bigger body in there. And also, if you're going to have to play Noah, you played him at the better position while not taking a huge downgrade. Like the downgrade of Mikey to Noah outside is bigger than the downgrade of Mikey to Noah inside. So you make the smaller downgrade. And I like that. So the question is now, as Emmanuel Forbes comes back into the mix, what does this rotation look like?
Yeah, once we get everybody healthy back, with Forbes coming back healthy, and then we can see exactly, where we're going to put Mikey, where we're going to put Forbes, and what we're going to do with Juice. And then you have Noah in there as well. So it's fluid. Nobody's really said, hey, this is where I'm going to be. And we're waiting for a couple guys to do that. And once that happens, we'll solidify exactly what we're going to do there.
Which is both a coach's way of wiggling out of a question, but also probably the truth. That, like, hey, if someone wants to step up and have a great game, then we'll happily put them a little bit closer to pen than pencil. But for right now, everything's on the table. And if Chigozie Anuzium, as he referred to earlier, winds up being the best practice player for this team over 3 weeks of practice, Chigozie Anuzium is probably going to find his way onto the field. So there is no one, whether it's contractually, Forbes is the closest one to contractually obligated to be on the field. That's too strong, but he's the guy with the most contractual security, and everybody else, like there's no real long-term ties. So outside of Sainer still, obviously, and he's in a bit of a different category as he was drafted by this group. Speaking of Sainer still, what's the ideal for him? Inside, outside, rotating? Joe Witt Jr. on his rookie.
Mike, in training camp, we had Mike inside a lot, and especially in the New York game, he was really sticky in the coverage and did a nice job. He has a lot of, really good call command. We moved him outside because of the need, and he got beat over the top on that one play and it was more of an understanding than just necessarily getting beat on it. But he's a young player that is coming and still developing. And once we get everybody together, he might move back inside. That might be his home. But for right now, we need him where we have him.
So it sounds like he might stay outside. And I also, again, wonder, like, how much of that is getting Igbenogany on the field if they think he's one of their better corners inside, and that's the path to do it. But it does beg the question, like, okay, well, if Forbes is coming back, and he's one of your top guys, theoretically, and Juice is played pretty well outside of 2 or 3 plays. And Sanders, there's only 2 outsides. So I'm curious if either Forbes is possibly not coming back. If, that's just hey, we're going to put him wherever and stop asking me these questions because I don't want to give away my answers. If it has something to do with Igbenogany and what they liked from him inside as a sticky physical player. But I guess we'll find out on Sunday. But there's also packages where he could be in multiple places. So going to be an interesting thing to track, I think, all season long, but especially as Forbes gets back in the lineup either this week or next. Okay, when we get back, the back half of our Pick 6, top Commanders headlines of the day, offensive edition. Cliff Kingsbury also spoke today. You'll hear from the Commanders OC next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well, always at the Team 980. Coming up in about 12 minutes, David Ubben from The Athletic on this absolutely bananas story out of UNLV where their starting quarterback is leaving the program because he did not get the NIL money he said he was promised. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about kind of the larger landscape of college football with Ubben, who's been covering. I remember when I was working in Dallas, he was covering the Big 12. He's been on the national scene forever. Great dude. So David Ubben will join us coming up at 6:30. But we continue now with our pick 6 and let you hear from Cliff Kingsbury. Number 4, please, Anthony.
Number 4.
So the touchdown pass heard around the world the other night. Jaden, 3rd and 7, deep. Terry, touchdown. Jaden, smashed in the face. Ouchie, but all good. Just an iconic play. The first play that I think we 1,000% cement will be on the Jaden Daniels career highlight reel. So with that said, what about the guy that called it? What was his thought process going into it? What did he think of the play? Here's Cliff.
Yeah, really think players, not plays. Like, that's all that was. We basically invented a play because Terry said, I got him. And then you could see the confusion. I screwed up the play call because I was trying to kind of flip things and make it, and they just made it work. And so it's like, in that situation, I learned a long time ago, you think players, not plays, and those two guys made a hell of a play.
I cannot tell you. Like, I want to give Cliff Kingsbury a hug after hearing that. Don't worry, Cliff. I don't know. Cliff doesn't strike me as a hugger.
Doesn't strike me as a hugger either.
Like a big celebration, like in the moment, bear hug guy, yes. Doesn't strike me as a hugger.
Nah.
So there's that. Don't worry. I'm not going to hug Cliff Kingsbury against his will. I'm not going to hug Cliff Kingsbury, period. But I want to, based off the idea of players, not plays. It's also a great explanation of why dudes were confused. Is like, Cliff's calling a play, but he's trying to tag it and make sure Terry... And eventually Jaden was just like, Luke, stop moving. We got the matchup we want. Just please don't line up illegally. Okay, set hut. Bang. Touchdown, Terry. But I can't tell you how many coordinators don't think like that. They're just like, they're going to run this coverage. So we got this, we got to do that. And Cliff's thought process is like, they're going to run this coverage. What's my best cover X beater? They're probably going to blitz. It's 3rd and 7. How do I get Terry isolated one-on-one? Let's just go 3-by-1. Let's get it. He said he wanted the play here because that's the other thing too. Terry specifically asked, I want to be in the boundary. He didn't want to be to the open side of the field because often safeties will shift over there and there's some other things that make that harder. He wanted that condensed space, one-on-one. Let's make sure that I have where I want to be. So he gets to the boundary. He gets on that right side. They have to get everybody else in the right spot on the left. Just basically to stand there and watch. And ball comes out and Jaden hits it. So it's a throw that he knows his quarterback can make. It's the guy he wants the ball to go into, and they were able to dictate it. And that's big-time stuff from Cliff. I love that they did that. Obviously, he needs to, and he would say this, and kind of did, like, he's like, I screwed up. I think that's an admission. Like, he needs to be better about making sure that everyone's on the same page if they need to draw up a play in the dirt. But they'll work on that, and they ultimately got it done. So, hoorah, hoorah. All right, number 5.
Number 5.
Here in our pick 6 at 6. 6 biggest headlines of the day, every day at 6 o'clock for the Commanders. Jaden Daniels has thrown some touchdown passes, including that one to Terry, but he has yet to throw one to the other team. Not just a touchdown pass, a pick 6. He hasn't thrown a pass to the other team at all. How has he done it so far as a young quarterback? It's almost unprecedented in NFL history to have this few interceptions. There's a couple of like combo stats that Jaden has where he's the first guy to do it, and no interceptions is like one of the statistics. So how is Jaden Daniels avoiding the turnover bug that bites nearly every rookie in this league?
Oh, don't do that to him. Don't do that to him. I'm kidding. He just sees the field. He is a quick processor, good decision maker, obviously, and he knows when the party's over. He knows when to throw it away or when to scramble and not force it in harm's way. And we're not built right now to overcome a lot of turnovers, and he knows that. And so we're trying to stay on schedule, be efficient, stay ahead of the chains, and he's really done a nice job so far of doing that.
I do kind of wonder, now that Cliff says that, like, I do wonder if Dan's like, hey, Cliff, can you not say that part out loud? The fact that he
that
said
was definitely a stray, Chris.
is like, we're not really built to overcome a lot of turnovers, and he knows that. Like, that's good that they're talking like that in the building. Like, hey, our defense, because they're not going to be like, hey, guys, look, our defense is terrible. They have I heard on the Hoffman show the other day, they have the 5th worst DVOA in league history through 3 games, and they've been keeping that stat since 1979. I don't think that's happening in the team meetings, but they are probably like, hey, I mean, sometimes it's in games, right? Like, hey, guys, our defense needs us right now. Like, let's stay ahead. So they can be like more motivational, but there's also probably a reality like, hey, our defense is figuring some stuff out right now. We need to support them. We cannot turn the football over. So if you're not sure, just run. And especially like as good as he is at running, and I bet you that is the instruction this weekend because Arizona plays some complex stuff defensively, and they're going to tell him like, dude, if you're not sure, it's fine. Don't force it. Don't guess. Just run. And he can keep the chains moving that way and stay on schedule and score points. So I just do think that is genuinely hilarious that Cliff said that out loud.
It's okay for, some teams to be like, all right, we're going to ride our defense, but it's not okay to say we're going to ride our offense, considering what we have on the other side of the ball. That's crazy.
It's not like, hey, look, it's not like Cliff was like, yeah, they suck and they're going to continue to suck all year. So, Joe, you better buy me a nice Christmas gift. No, like they're gonna work as a unit and as best they can to make sure that they do as best as they can on Sunday and moving on forward. That defense is working really, really hard to get it figured out. They're not staffed to be awesome. And so there's just a reality of that. And that's good coaching ultimately is what it is. I think it's hilarious that he said it out loud, but like, what's the harm? I don't want to be like, I almost regret pointing it out because now like they'll be like, oh, I don't want to say that again. And it's like, no, it's okay to be honest. Like we all see it. We know what the stats are. You didn't tell us anything new. It was actually refreshing to hear someone acknowledge reality for once. No coach, ban coach speak forever. That's what I say. All right. Last but not least.
Number 6.
Cliff did identify, speaking of being honest, a couple of areas in week 2 that he wanted to see improvement on going into week 3. Did he think that those specific areas were improved upon in Monday night's win over Cincinnati?
Yeah, the biggest deal was the negative plays. We had 18 in week 2, and we had 4 the other night, and it allowed us to not be in many third and longs and stay on schedule and play downhill and mix in some of the tempo, and I think that was the kind of secret sauce to being able to score in the red zone as well. No negative plays in the red zone, which the previous week was our Achilles heel. So I thought the negative plays was the biggest improvement.
Yeah, I mean, that's so big. And we talked about this morning on Take Command. You can check that out wherever you get your podcast, our preview show. Jaden's ability to keep them on schedule and to avoid the negative plays and even turn what would be negative plays into explosive chunk plays, like, man, that is enormously impactful because it just makes Cliff's job so much easier. There are no good plays on the play sheet for any coordinator for 3rd and 13. 3rd and 3, the entire playbook's open. And they've been in a lot more 3rd and 3s than they have 3rd and 13s this year. Real quick, bonus pick 6, just because I saw this in the transcript, Anthony. We don't need to pull the audio. Did you see that Cliff did answer one of the burning questions we had for Cliff Kingsbury upon his return to Arizona?
He did?
Yeah. He still has that house. The one from the 2020 draft that everyone saw.
Wow.
The one that was on Hard Knocks, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Cliff said he still had the house. On what comes to mind when he thinks about his time with the Cardinals and if he feels bitter about how it ended? Not at all. I mean, that's why I still got my house here. I love it out here. So I will always be grateful to Michael Bidwell for giving me that opportunity. I think this is actually a really funny quote. First fired college coach to ever get that opportunity. Cliff with a little self-deprecation. And then the guys in that building, some of my closest friends and the team. You watch those guys play, James Conner, Buda Baker, they still inspire me, so nothing but positive memories. And then someone followed up. If I had to bet money, I would say it was J.P. Finley. On if his house is the famous one from the draft, he said, it's the house. Yeah, it's the house. That's the one. It hadn't changed.
Wow.
So Cliff, I was wondering. Look at Cliffy coming through. He's still got the house. All right, when we get back, speaking of college, what the hell is going on at UNLV? You've probably gotten 1,000 alerts about this story. The quarterback's leaving. The running back's leaving. The university says this. The quarterback says that about all this NIL stuff. So let's get someone who's actually covering it. David Ubben is going to join us next from The Athletic to break down the latest NIL NCAA fiasco here on The Hoffman Show. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And I'm excited to talk about this story. We probably could do 3 hours on this story, but we're going to have David Ubben from The Athletic join us here and talk about this UNLV story that you've probably gotten like 17, I was going to say ESPN alerts, but The Athletic alerts on your phone. Yes, clearly, David. That's where everyone's getting their news from, as they should. And you and your colleagues have written quite a bit about this. I'm going to try to summarize quickly for the audience that hasn't maybe clicked on any of those yet. So their quarterback says he was promised a bunch of NIL money, hasn't gotten it. His dad is saying, one thing, and the school is saying one thing. Their NIL collective has chimed in. There's a disagreement over NIL money. And now that we are in this red shirt deadline period where if you play 4+ games, the season counts towards your eligibility. Players, and he is the highest profile one to do this, are saying, like, if we don't get the money that we were promised, or if we don't like the way things are going, I'm going to redshirt myself, as opposed to the traditional redshirt, which has been imposed on them by coaches. That is the quickest summary I can give. In terms of this specific story, like, as you hear all the different participants chime in, what do we feel like we know? And then what is disputed here that's kind of at the center of this specific version? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And I'm excited to talk about this story. We probably could do 3 hours on this story, but we're going to have David Ubben from The Athletic join us here and talk about this UNLV story that you
but get a written contract that's enforceable. And it seems now that the real reason why, which the family wasn't being told, is that they didn't have the money to pay it.
So there was no written contract when this, initial thing was made. That's not up for dispute. There's no, the family's not being like, oh no, we have this writing.
No.
So what does that say? I guess that leads to kind of immediately to the larger conversation and some of the things that I was seeing on Twitter. I'm sure conversations you're having as someone who covers college football, like, what is the current state of the agent game? Because this deal was theoretically negotiated by NIL agents, but I'm assuming the quality of said agents is extraordinarily vast. Is that at the crux of one of the issues? Obviously, we can talk in a second, and I do want to, about like the NCAA's lack of rules and regulations, but the actual agents who are negotiating these deals, is that at the crux of a lot of problems, the fact that there aren't standards and quality for the people doing the negotiating?
It varies pretty widely. The Jaden Rashada deal got a lot of attention. He did have a written contract for $13 million with Florida's collective. That deal was negotiated by, helped negotiate by a 20-year-old SMU student. So,
Wow.
But in this case, it's Antonio Cromartie's cousin. Marcus Cromartie was the agent in question here. And he does work with NFL clients. He does work in the NIL space. But it seems that UNLV at some point during all this discovered that he was not licensed to work in Nevada, which seems like a problem because there's an NFL team in Nevada and there are 2 FBS teams in Nevada. Seems like an issue. But ultimately, I haven't heard a lot. He works for Equity Sports. It's a very large firm. So I don't think it's necessarily like just some guy running around, having deals. He is seemingly certified by the NFLPA. A lot of those guys double dip and do some NIL work. So the quality can vary widely. So outside of the licensing issue in Nevada, and honestly, I don't know a lot about being licensed to be an agent in certain states. I don't know a lot about the logistics of that. Again, agencies and all that stuff is very new to college football. But ultimately, I don't think that this is a situation of an agent gone wild. And it seems like, there's a lot of deals that are agreed to verbally, and then the contract comes later. And sometimes it does take a little while. Not to this degree, and you could call into question, like, should you move from Massachusetts to Las Vegas without a written contract? Yeah, it seems to be that's a fair question there, but ultimately, he had trust in the coaching staff. He was given $3,000 for moving expenses, so that's something. But I think you just don't really consider that they're just not going to pay you or not going to have a written contract. And especially when they're not saying we're not going to do it, or they're, it's just a delay and a delay. It's like, well, we'll get to it this time. We'll get to it this time. You want to have faith in them until at some point, you get to a point where your red shirt's coming up and you got to decide, well, I can't do this anymore.
David Ubben of The Athletic, one of their national senior college football writers, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So I feel like so much of the stuff around NIL for years, even going back to before the rule change, just came from, for lack of a better word, David, laziness on the NCAA's part. They don't want to regulate this stuff. They don't want to deal with the headache. They're just like, yeah, sure, maybe you could do this, but like it sounds complicated. And so when the Supreme Court was like, you have to let athletes, like amateurism, no more. You have to let them profit off their name, image, and likeness, the NCAA was like, fine, go ahead. And that was kind of it. How much of the problems that we're having with NIL could realistically be fixed if the NCAA acted as a governing body as opposed to a collection agency from the ESPN rights deals that they make billions of dollars off of?
Yeah, I think ultimately you look at there was a time to have a common sense approach to this, and you could have more clear rules, have a lot of debate over those rules, and get to a system that everybody kind of agrees on. Instead, you get dragged out of the Stone Ages by the courts, and then you don't really have any rules. You don't have any enforcement arm to enforce those rules when you talk about like tampering or contracts or things to protect kids. And if you try to put the oft-mentioned, guardrails, which I disagree with in general, but if you try to put guardrails on it, you're going to get challenged in court. You're going to lose. The NCAA has been beaten over and over and over in courts, and you're not going to be able to uphold any of these rules because they are anti-capitalist, and it's just not going to happen. Every time the NCAA tries to explain their business model to a court, the judge or the court kind of looks at them and it's like, you do what? It doesn't go well for them. It never does.
Right.
And so when you when these things are happening involuntarily, then you have a lot less control over what the terms of engagement are. And at this point, it is kind of a free for all. And until you have something resembling employment, resembling contracts, resembling collective bargaining, resembling a players association, which the college sports has none of that right now, and it's kind of working towards some of those things on top of revenue sharing as well from those TV deals. You're going to be stuck in this weird limbo where the sport is evolving, and that's where we're at right now.
Which of those things are getting worked on? Like, what is the hope that it becomes more organized in what areas soonest?
Well, the House settlement, is coming, and that seems to definitely be something where revenue sharing is going to be coming very, very soon. Just because all that money, the schools are not going to be able to keep that for that much longer. These are literally $1 billion deals. The conferences are negotiating and divvying out to schools. And so that's where the real money is. People talk about NIL, but the real money is in these TV deals, and that's the money they've been trying to protect. So that's probably the closest thing. But again, if you get something, I think everybody agrees, players, coaches, administrators, the perpetual free agency is not good for the sport. But the only way you can change that is have something resembling player contracts. Maybe that's year to year. Maybe that's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You could probably, depending on who you are, negotiate some of those terms. But there are no norms there, and there's no ability to do that, and there's no players association to do that. There's a lot of people jockeying to be that players association. So for right now, I think we get eventually towards something resembling all those things. But the revenue sharing is the other thing that really is more of a sure thing than anything else.
Do you think that football will wind up becoming its own entity in this? Because NIL is not something that is unique to football.
Mm-hmm.
As we, if people watch, say, the Money Game, which featured, of course, Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels, then LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels on Amazon Prime, and it highlights all the different NIL deals that all the different athletes across all of their sports are making. But the revenue model in football is totally different. The amount of money that comes in via football is enormous. So, and also you have the travel logistics and all these other things that have popped up. Do you think as this regulation and the revenue sharing and all these things come in, that football winds up splitting off into its own entity?
Probably. I mean, I think for conference perspectives, I think we're definitely going to get to something close to that. In the next 25 years, it doesn't make sense that Cal, soccer needs to go play in the ACC, or
as a Syracuse alum, but I'm not really psyched about Stanford football last week either. But that's our problem.
Like why does Rutgers lacrosse or whatever need to go play in the Big Ten against USC? It doesn't make sense. So I think if football breaks off, the conferences can find something that makes a little bit more sense. And then for Title IX stuff, football players become just like a license. I think people don't really want them to become the licensed marketing arm of the university, but that simplifies a lot of things. That produces a lot of eligibility questions and some logistics there. But for campus dynamics and campus economics and being compliant with Title IX, if you make them sort of just a franchise that licenses the names and trademarks and stadiums and facilities, I think a lot of people don't like that because they like to buy into the sort of, these kids are just going to campus like everybody else, but they haven't been for a long time. And all of the things that we've talked about, from NIL to conference realignment and all that stuff, football is driving it, and it is breaking college sports. And I think you have a chance to salvage kind of what's left if you break off football. But just thinking about the logistics of that is giving me a headache right now. So it's a long way before we get close to that. And I think there's a lot of people in college sports that don't want that. So I don't know that we'll ever get to something quite like what I described, but something where football is a standalone in some way feels inevitable at this point.
Yeah. I mean, these are also literally institutions, and changing institutions is hard. And a lot of the people in college sports are institutionalists. So it is going to be an uphill battle for sure, but probably one that either they will, get ahead of for once in their lives, or they will be dragged by either the Supreme Court and or Congress to do so. We'll see which choice they take. David Ubben writing about all of it and the actual games, which is nice. At The Athletic, you could read his work there and click on those alerts when they come to your phone. They have good information. David, appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we got like 7 minutes left in this edition of the Hoffman Show, and we have a lot to get to. First, before we forget, Thursday Night Football tonight, Anthony Haney. Who do you have, Cowboys and Giants?
It's a great question, Craig. I think I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, what a bold take.
I think I'm going with the Dallas Cowboys.
One team lost last week. The other team won. You're taking the team that lost last week.
You are absolutely right about that. But again, like I said on Wednesday, a lot of teams wrote this team, or my bad, not wrote, are writing this team off just because of a terrible start to the season. And yes, they have looked bad early on, but I trust in Dak to figure it out. I just need them to run the ball a little bit more because that is what they refuse to do. Put the ball in the hands of Zeke. Let him do his thing.
What is Zeke's thing at this point?
I mean, he's looked okay when he's ran the ball. All I'm saying is you don't want – I mean, I guess you did pay Dak all of this money. But at the same token, you can't just put the game in his hands and let him drop back 60 times.
I think this is so funny. I
don't think you should.
Look,
I mean,
we're going to talk to Will Dawkins on Monday. At Wizards Media Day, and I really
James Cook is running for the Bills, Craig. He is running for the Bills.
But the fact that you last week were arguing with Bills fan Wizards GM Will Dawkins about Dak Prescott versus Josh Allen, and your whole thing was like Dak can do everything. They put it all on Dak, and now you're like they gotta run the football with Zeke. I just think it's funny.
You need to have a balance. The
I
Bills
don't
have a balance.
philosophically. I think it's funny that
great
you're
offense
making
that
the
they're
argument
running up there. He's getting some help from James Cook. James Cook scored 3 times 1 week. Oh, that was against the Dolphins. Yeah, 3 times, correct?
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is take some of the low,
yes, some
pressure.
balance.
Yes.
Dak got paid all that money because he's capable of handling a lot, but they're putting a little bit too much on his plate.
Thank you.
And the Giants, they're not. If this Cowboys defense can't get better against the Giants, the Commanders defense only gave up 18 points to the Giants. Okay, they might have not had a kicker, but there's that.
They got 2 rookies up front though, and one of those rookies will be tasked with blocking Dexter. I don't know how that's going to fare. And then the other one, the right tackle, he's given up a ton of pressures all season.
Their O-line is not. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a way the Giants win this game, but Thursday Night Football is always weird. So who knows?
It is weird. So should we go with the Giants?
I mean, you can. I'm going to take the Cowboys.
Should we do the spread thing? Nah. I'm going with the Cowboys, man.
All right.
They better not let me down.
We're both
This
going
is
with
the
the Cowboys.
kind of day or team to let me down.
Signed Cowboys fans since 1990, whatever it was. All right. The other thing is best thing from the show today, Anthony. We had so much good stuff. I feel like Pat P. Like when you have a future Hall of Famer on, that's pretty hard to top.
Yeah, Pat P. Was really good. Gave some really good insight onto, what could possibly be going wrong with our defense. Even though it seems quite obvious, the way he explained it, I think.
Yeah, he shed more insight. It's pretty obvious to say a couple of things, but the guy who's played with the experience and was on the all-decade team, he's got a little bit more to say. That's the first time I've heard him do media stuff outside of a couple of podcast clips. He's really good. And I know he wants to get back on a team, but I'm happy he's on our team as an Odyssey Sports Insider for right now. And whenever his playing time is done, I hope that he stays with us and accessible for a while, although I feel like he'll get into television and someone will pay him a lot of money because he's darn good at it. But he was great at 5:15 today, worth checking out in the podcast as well. Speaking of podcasts, there's a lot happening in the Hoffman sports universe, if you will, on top of the 3 hours a day we're doing on the radio. We got a couple of podcasts as well. The NWSL show, we recorded a new episode today. So what's going on in the National Women's Soccer League. And then Lindsay D'Arcangelo and I will do a fresh episode of the WNBA show previewing the second round of the W playoffs tomorrow. So you can check that out by subscribing to Hoffman W Sports. Search that in your podcast feed or on YouTube. With that, the other housekeeping item, Anthony, is don't be late for the show tomorrow because it'll be over before you blink. Maryland football is on with us tomorrow starting at 5:30. So our show is cut in half. We are going to try to cram our usual Friday into a half a show. So obviously 5:30, we typically go around the NFL. Our show will be over. So I think I put that in at 4:30. I think we're going to do our pick 6 at 5 which I realize is not how that's supposed to work because it's the pick 6 at 6. We're still going to pick 6. We're just going to do it at 5. We'll talk about what's at stake and give you some scouting coming off the top. So it'll be a jam-packed show tomorrow. Try to condense 3 hours worth of knowledge, information, and even a little bit of entertainment down into simply 90 minutes. Okay, with that said, Anthony, anything else that we need to cover?
No.
Okay, then it's time for real things.
Real things.
We're not gonna suck this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, today I mentioned this in What's Trending, the last ever game for the Oakland A's at Oakland Coliseum. It was a bittersweet day. They got the win. It's obviously a terrible situation, a team just being ripped by I have no nice things to say about their owner, out of that city, and it was an emotional day. Here's how the last out sounded. This is from A's television, correct, Anthony? So here's how it sounded on A's TV.
Here's the 1-2, Jankowski to Schumann, and the ground ball will end things. A 3-2 win for the Oakland Athletics. One more win for the Oakland fans.
A W on a day that everybody in the Bay needed one.
Like, I love the call where she's like, a win for the Oakland A's. She really put the emphasis there. And like, honestly, man, like, I'm glad they won. I'm glad the fans get that moment. But, and you just don't go out with a whimper. But also, like, listening to that just makes me sad. Like, imagine a team you grew up, especially like when the owner just like does a bad job. They don't invest in the team. They don't do it, and you continue to emotionally invest for years and years and years and years, and then they still take the team away. Like, you didn't invest. We did. We had our money, our time. You have lots of money. You didn't invest any of it. Sucks. Anyway, Damon Mendelara, our good friend, has done great work on this. Clinton Yates, I know, is out there as well reporting on it, so check out their work. And we'll see you tomorrow back here on the Team 980.